Hey, 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 hey. What's happening, people? Okie dokie. We're going to be starting here pretty soon. Just making sure this thing doesn't shit the bed when I go. All right. Ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. Party people. Ba-ba-ba-ba. Okay. Welcome to the live stream, everybody. By now, you should hear my computer wuzzing and burring, or whizzing and burring. I just made those words up because it's about to crash. Because I just loaded up some of the photos in Photoshop that we're going to be looking at today. So that's exciting. All right, here we go. Okay, let's. If you are new again to the Patreon live stream, easiest to use the chat that is in the YouTube, right? Because I won't see it any other way. So if you have questions or comments or I don't know, you want to talk to your fellow man or woman, go in the chat, the YouTube chat, and do that. I think everybody's pretty familiar with that by now. So today, what are we doing? We are doing. We're going to be looking at some footage that I think it's Julian has sent in, right? And this is not rocket science. Now, I think we can crack the code of how I go about choosing which videos to break down, and that's essentially the person that that sends it to me, the closest to me going live. And Julian just so happened to be at the top of the list. So I'm not going through and choosing based on any other form. I know that there's lots of people that have sent it in. It's just I get so many messages that I look at the first one, I see, can we talk about this? Is it going to make sense? And I thought I was on mute that whole time. But I think you can hear me. So yes, Julian, round 2 for you. So that is the formula. If you'd like to be featured on the show, try and look at the schedule and then just send it in, right? Because I usually do it about 10 minutes before we go live. So what's happening? Well, yeah, not a whole lot in terms of work. A bit of a shit week, actually, because my dog of 12 years with the same dog, was sick on Tuesday and ended up thinking he got bit by something or some toxin or some snake because we live by a river, or a blowfish that he ingested. Turns out he actually has some sort of growth in his brain. It's been like 4 days of up and down. And I know if you follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen the dog on my Instagram before. And I know a lot of people say that they have the greatest dog in the world. But this dog, I'd probably, if we were in person and it was between you and the dog, I would definitely choke you out with my own hands. So it has been a bit of an up and down week, but I just got the word about 2 minutes ago that he's coming home. So that's a good thing for the dog. It has nothing to do with cinematography, but that should give you some idea of the preparation that's going into this live stream, which is almost zero, right? Because I've been focused on other things. In terms of work, lots of fun stuff. And I was going to share some of the images that we broke down a few weeks ago in the sort of pre-production for the sort of night moonlight scene that we had talked about, and how I'd gone over the location scout photos and the pre-production stuff. We were going to talk about that, but I didn't have enough time with the whole dog thing. So maybe next week, or maybe I do a video instead of a live stream. Slightly easier and easier on the computer, and overall just a easier vibe. But you never know. We don't get the questions in there. So as you know, the formula for this thing is I'm going to go through the questions that we had on the post, or questions I've gotten throughout the week, and then we're going to go into looking at some of the work that you've sent in, which in this case today is Julian. So let's take a look at the chat. Chat time. Okay, we got hello friends, good day mate. Here we go. D&N Cinematics LLC. Very official. DNN. Hey everyone, I used some techniques I learned here today on a shoot that I normally wouldn't do. Footage looked great. Wanted to say thanks. Well, I guess the first question that you have to ask here, DNN, what is it? DNN Cinematics, is why you're thanking everyone. Why are you thanking everyone? Don't you have someone particular that you'd like to call out? No, I'm only taking the piss. Yes, that's cool. Cool. You got, you did a cool little shoot. Okay. What do we got here? We got, yes, Brendan, thank you for the computer crashing. I promise I will. I know I have this giant rendering station computer that I've had sitting here for months. I just need to figure out how to patch it in to do the live stream. And then all my computer problems will be gone. And this thing will run smoothly. But at the moment, that is certainly not the case. And I haven't gone about fixing it. So it'll be a while. Okay. You just gave away my secret for getting featured. Yes, that's. Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize, Julian, but twice in however many months we've been doing this is not bad. So yes, that's the secret. How many submissions do you get for these? I would probably say at least 10 a week. People send me stuff. So I wish I could get to them all. Well, do I really wish I could get to them all? No. That's I'm pandering to the audience there. I don't wish I could get through them all. I wish that I could. Yeah, it would be fun to talk to the person individually and go through it. But I'm glad I'm not spending 8 hours a week looking at other people's work. That's the honest truth. But it's fun for the sort of community to get together and we look at these things. So I'm glad that we get to do this once a week, right? Maybe twice a week. That'd be cool. But yeah, for the moment, that's how many submissions that I get. Peter Chapman. Yeah, dog. I like that one. How do you send images? I cannot send a shareable link. I don't know. Maybe you could email it to me and I can look at it. Probably not during the live stream though. I am getting messages and I'm interrupting this live stream for a dog update. So, sorry. Okay. A-okay. Okay, so let's get to the questions. This is from the post on Patreon. In last week's podcast, this one's from Ben Yonker. In last week's podcast, when discussing crew size, Nicholas mentioned having keys plus 5, keys plus 4. In the past, you've described having crews that were 2 and 2 or 4 and 4. Will you please elaborate on the specifics of those terms? Yeah, so the key is the person in charge, or the key member, normally the person that comes along for the tech scout, or the person that will come along to the meetings. So if it's, you know, if you're talking about the key in the lighting department, you're talking about your gaffer. They would do all the, you'd communicate with them the most, essentially. They're the key member of the team, and then you have all of the people under them. So keys plus 5 is going to be 6 in that department, right? Keys plus 4. So 2 and 2, basically in Australia, on a commercial, you're talking 4 and 4 would be quite a big commercial, especially 4 grips would be a big commercial because of the way that the system is different here with the gaffer, with the lighting doing all of the bounces and on exterior stuff like that. So very rare would you have that amount. Normally, on a normal budget, it's either 3 and 2, so 1 key plus 2 others in the lighting, and the key grip and 1 other grip in the gripping. Again, that's just the system here, and it all depends on what you're doing. But if you're doing a normal sort of location day, not a giant lighting setup, I'd say typically, normally you're looking after about, if you include in the camera, you've got the first AC, the second, and generally a data wrangler as well. So you're looking probably looking after about 10 people on your average crew for a commercial down here. That can quickly change depending on the budget and the type of shit that you're doing. So that is that one. Yeah. What do we got here? Next up, we got, okay, this is a question from Rob. And this one is, hey, Patrick, big fan of the podcast. Trying to butter me up here. Curious how much of what you shoot on the Alexa is shot on Arri RAW versus one straight to ProRes like Codex 444XQ. I am generally in a position to decide this, and I will always say shoot RAW. That's because I have nothing to do with the back end. I don't have to manage any of it. But now computers have gotten savvy enough and the storage has gotten cheap enough where very rarely are you going to get pushback, especially if the director's on board. saying that they want it for some particular reason. So I would always, if given the option, shoot RAW, only because, like I said, I don't have to deal with any of the other things. I know a lot of people prefer ProRes on the other aspects of, in the other departments of finishing, but for ease of use. But now I sort of put that burden on other people. I like RAW. It just gives you that little bit more flexibility, and I don't really see a downside to it if the production is open to paying for more storage and someone to be there on set to sort of manage, depending on how much we're shooting. Again, where you can sort of get thrown off is if you're shooting 2 cameras, or if you're running and gunning, especially on the Mini. If you're running and gunning on the Mini and you're shooting RAW, you're pretty much fucking yourself, because you're going to be changing cards so many times. That is one of the big advantages of the SXT and the XT, to be able to do in-camera RAW to the codex cards. Makes a big difference with the size of them. You don't have to be changing quite as much. So I would say every opportunity I get, I would shoot ARRI RAW. That being said, next week we're doing 3 days of ProRes at 1080, which brings up another point that people have been asking me about the new RED camera and the full frame camera and the ARRI full frame camera and all these things that are coming. I have never once been asked for 4K. And if you go back and listen to the recap podcast of how many days and how many jobs that I do in a year, I still don't know if that's a lot. I still don't know if that's a little. No one ever really responds. No other people of the industry come out and say, hey, Patrick, I saw that podcast. It's sort of radio silence on those things. So I'm just sort of putting it out into the world. Maybe you guys in the comments could say, or give us an idea of how many days you guys are working, or what you're trying to go for, or what you think would be normal. But in that sort of 50 to 60 days on set a year, I've never once been asked for it on any particular job. So with the 8K stuff coming out, I don't know if that's an advantage. Certainly the XT still rents for way more than any RED camera in the market, at least here in Australia. And I imagine the large format will be much the same, even though it'll be less available and probably quite a bit more expensive, because here I think the starting package for that thing is $140,000. So I don't know how many commercials are going to be using that, especially given the lenses and everything like that. Okay, so let's go back here. What are we taking a look at the questions as they come in? Do my little radio voice here. Okay. Hey, Tavis from Melbourne. What's happening? What else we got? We got Angel. It's a question, but I need to share the image so you can answer. Bummer. Next time. Send it in next time. That way we can laugh about how production screwed you. Okay, hey Patrick, both podcasts are such a huge inspiration. Blah, blah, blah. Just wondering if you had any podcasts or websites that you regularly check for inspiration or reference. Podcast, the only real podcast that I listen to, I guess I listen to Joe Rogan. I listen to every Joe Rogan podcast. I listen to Sam Harris's podcast, Waking Up. I listen to other cinematography things. I listen to the Cinematography Podcast, which I said in the episode this week, I really liked the Rachel Morrison one. The ASC one I always listen to as well, even though it sort of gives me the shits. And then people like Evan Boursier, I've heard those podcasts, I've been on that podcast. And sometimes, the Go Creative one, if there's a cinematographer on there, I sort of keep abreast of all those things. But there are so many. Jesus, man, there are so many cinematography podcasts out there now. Like, you can spend your day just listening to people blabber about this stuff. So it's all out there. Okay, here we go. I'm late to the party. Is this just a regular Q&A? Neil, I wouldn't say this is a regular Q&A. I'd say that the bar in terms of quality is actually quite high. So no, it's not a regular Q&A. Okay. Next, what do we got here from Sam? Maybe we'll do, what time is it? It's 10:20. Maybe we'll do a few more of these, and then I'll get back to the breakdown here. Any advice working with a gaffer for the first time? What's the most effective way to communicate with them? Every person's different. I like to go in there guns blazing. I've talked about this before. I give everybody one shot to not to dictate exactly what I want. I sort of explain what I want, and this goes for the tech scout as well. You can sort of, as you get more experienced, you can sort of tell by the type of fixtures that the person's talking about, right? If you don't lead with the fixtures, but you let them lead with the fixtures, you can pretty much find the wavelength of budget and I guess level of intricacy that the person is interested in or is used to just by the language that they use. So if you go in and you never worked with someone before, and you're in a big space, you may say, well, we want to create this sort of mood and we want to pull the person from the background, a nice big soft source. And if someone says, well, we could use an M18 through a 6x6, they'd probably be like, let's see what's happened here. I see what's happened here, the old M18 crowd. When really what you want to hear is, well, I can get the boys here 3 days before. We'll set up the condors outside. We can get 18Ks pumping through. That's sort of what you want to hear. And then you can go from there and get a gauge. But even in the setup on the day, as you start to, depending on the budget level, of course, that you're working with. Actually, this is sort of irrespective of the budget. On those first setups, as you've explained them, and hopefully you've explained them on the Tech Scout, and they know exactly what you want, and you've talked about fixtures, and you've talked about distance and levels and what your shooting stop's going to be and all this sort of stuff. Say you've gone through all of that, and you get there on the day, and you don't want to tell people, you don't want to micromanage and tell people exactly how to put things and where to put things if you can avoid it. Of course, it is your name on the thing if it sucks. See, that's sort of where you don't have license to be a tool, but you definitely don't want it to be shit, right? Because it's your name. So there is that fine balance between when you start to take over. But in that first setup, you say, let's bring in that little light from over here. We'll just wrap it around with a little something here. And if it turns out that it looks like shit, then you just, obviously that you're going to be managing for the rest of the day. And then you have to take into account, okay, well, do I need to go quickly? Because if I need to go quickly, I'm probably not going to work with you again. We're not going to be friends. I'm just going to take over. And I'm going to tell you exactly. I'm going to treat you like a 2-year-old and probably bypass you and see if I can talk to the best boy. But what you'd be hoping for is that it would come out great, and then you wouldn't have to worry about it. And then you could just have the conversation like you normally would with directors and the gaffer and sort of get along that way. My favorite type of gaffer by far, and this sort of comes with budget, is I want someone that's constantly, it seems awkward to say, I just want someone constantly behind me. So that when I'm sitting at the monitor, I'm sitting on the dolly, and I say, you know what, that sort of looks like shit. Like, that level in the background, that light that we just put up, it just needs to come down a little bit. And then you sort of do one of these, and you're like, initial reaction is, okay, where's the gaffer? Like, I gotta get somebody on this. Because, again, depending on the set and the crew that's involved, a lot of the times you don't want to be going over there and like fucking with the thing yourself, right? Because you don't know how they set it up. It could be a different way. You're focused on other stuff. So it's not always best to just go over there and start messing with it and stepping on people's toes. So you immediately look for the gaffer and you're like, where's the gaffer? Where's fucking Jimmy? We need Jimmy the gaffer in here. And this whole time that you're looking for Jimmy the gaffer, you're standing 5 feet away from the lamp. You could easily just turn it, right? That's the situation that you want to try and avoid. But it's not easy to do, to fight the urge to go over there and change it. What I want is if someone's just behind you, right? And this happens as the budgets move higher and you get more people that are out there fiddling with the lights, and the gaffer can take the time to really be a manager. A lot of the times you say, man, that light over there sucks. Like, what if it was orange? And then you don't even hear anything, but you turn around and you hear, you see this little, and you look at the gaffer and you're like, oh. And then you look back at the monitor and there's some fucking dude back there and he's got the, he's got the gel out and he's dimming the thing and he's, then he's like, and then it looks great. And then you go, all right, here we go. This is going to be fun. So I can't remember how I got onto that story, but that's what you want. Someone just behind you, sort of doing shit before you're telling them to, right? That's the sort of sign of a good gaffer. Okay, I'm not going to do any more. I'll just stop answering the chat for a second, but we'll come back to it afterwards. So, actually, there's one more here. One more question. This one is from Ryan. And Ryan asks about personalities for long-term success in being a DP. I'm sure that there are a variety of personalities, but I bring this story up to show you, to give you an insight into my own personality, right? I have talked about it many times on here about buying gear. I don't think, generally it's not a good idea. I would refrain from it at all costs. But I don't follow my own advice. And I'm saying that you definitely should not do what I'm about to tell you I'm doing. But it's sort of a unique situation because I'm in Australia, and a part of Australia where there's not too many rental houses. And I just don't like to be fucked with. I guess that's the number one thing. You people can understand that. No one does. So I have a small amount of gear, right? I have enough to get through certain things. I definitely don't want any more gear. I don't need any more gear. I'm not interested in any more gear. But I guess this relates in the sense that you can be as good as Roger Deakins. You can be as good as fill in the blank, Max Goldman. But if you're a complete tool or a dickhead, this is still a service business, right? You are still serving the director, the person that hires you, the production company, the agency, all these people that trickle down in the decisions to getting you on board. You're still, if they don't like you, you're probably pretty screwed. So they have to like you. And so you can't do dipshit things. And unfortunately, actually, I'm not even going to go into the story. Fuck it. Because it's too... I teased you, and then I'd get upset if I said the story, so I'll forget about it. Anyway, okay. That was an awkward segue because I was going to start that thing. Now I'm not. Okay, here we go. What do we got here? This one is from Julian, and what do we got here? What am I doing? Okay, this one is from Julian, and this is a really good example, and I brought this one up, right, because it is a good example of blocking and dealing with the limitations of location, right? Number one, I guess we should talk about what we're looking at here. We're talking about a guy, yeah, sorry, Ash, yeah, I had to pull the plug. A guy is playing this piano, right? We sort of walk through this whole thing. He's in this room. You can already see some of the trickery, some of the DP fuckery that is going on with the blocking, which we'll talk about, of the scene and the composition. And he's playing the piano, and then there's this girl that comes in, and she's listening. They have a bit of a chit-chat and a little dance-off sort of number. I'm not sure what this is actually a commercial for. And as we keep going, what's the control for just tabbing over instead of clicking on these individually? I used to know it in Photoshop. And here we are, another scene. And so this is the whole thing, right? It's this guy and this girl, and they're having a gay old time doing whatever it is they do. Let's talk about this initial shot. Number one, the very first thing you should be screaming out is that it's single source, right? Which is very good. Single source is good. This is sort of the setup and the blocking that if you were going in on a commercial, if you're going in on feature into this location, this is what you would be hoping for. This is the ideas that you would be suggesting to the director. And the reason why you'd be suggesting this is why? Anyone from the audience would like to participate and tell me why this is the way to go in terms of blocking? Number one, you cannot see the light source, right? It would be very hard in this room if you pivoted the camera around this way and then you were pointing the camera, that's the matte box, this is the actual box of the camera. If you came around this way and we're shooting this way, you of course would see into the source, right? And that is a bummer because the window would blow out, it would look like shit. But in order to not see the source, you sort of have to plan all of the shots. And then you have to work in reverse to say, okay, when are we not going to see the window? How can we not see the window? Where can we set up the actors? Where can we set the talent so that our gag really is never given up? And it takes participation from everywhere, from every department. So here, good things. We've got single source, right? Light coming through here. You got the shears. You got the curtain trick to keep the light off the walls, even if it is very marginal. I guess you're getting hosed here by the production design. You got nice wood, but then you got this sort of white wall, which is never good for moody images. We talked about that on the bedroom commercial that we were breaking down. Sort of a bummer, but happens quite a bit. So you got those white walls. These curtains, maybe a little bit more thicker. Cut that wall off a little bit, make that a little bit darker back there. But you're doing okay. You got this pole that's covering up the window, which is fantastic. And it overall is a nicely composed shot. You know, you got these production design elements here. You're not shooting into a flat wall. You're shooting down the line of the room, which is great. That's good. Okay, Julian, a one-man band for this entire thing. Okay, that's good. Now we know. We're in the context of things, but I'll probably chat it through like we were doing commercial style here, just so that's just the way I would think about something like this. So, good things, I would say. Angle, composition, all the lighting's good. Not getting any shitty fringing around the blah of a window there. And so I would say everything good here, right? Framing, just like that. This shot, okay, you're sort of looking into the source, but this is one of those ones where if you're on set and you get into a situation like this, so actually I was going to talk about this before. What I would do here, again, if I was looking at the monitor, I'm thinking, okay, what's important about this shot? Well, we have to set the frame so that people know that this guy's playing the piano. He's having a good time in there. Is this stuff important over here? I don't think so. I would probably take that down. I would probably knock this level down a bit. So something, I don't know if I have to do this every time because you guys are so adept now at the skills necessary to make this a reality. But I would probably, look at that, computer not freezing. I knew it was going to be a good day. Blur that out a little bit, or like somewhere in there. And then, you know, I probably wouldn't rely as much on that, on the brightness of those things. I'd probably knock that level down. It just draws people's eyes to exactly what we want to show them. So I would say that would be my one thing here that I would probably be like, wait a second, we can make this better real quick. Okay, for this shot, yeah. What was I saying before? I was saying that if I was in this position and we were shooting with a crew, and sometimes you have to look into the light source a little bit, right? This light source is giving us that edge. Personally, I would probably have had, in the production design meeting, I would have said, can we get some curtains that'll actually block the light? And can we make them slightly bunchier and bigger so that we have the capability to spread them out a little bit? And as you could spread them out a little bit, that'll take away more light. And then I would build a little 4x4 cocoon of floppies. So floppy behind the camera here, floppy behind the camera here, curtains that were thicker that probably went to about there, right? So you got the darkness of the curtains matched up with the highlight in his hair. That's what I'd be thinking there. And then I wouldn't really be lighting from this window. I'd set that level to, I mean, there would be light coming through the window, but I'd set the level so that that wasn't producing this. You know what I mean? I'd have it so it was just a, sorry, I'm reading the questions and trying to do this thing. I'm just not gonna look at the questions. Yeah, I'd set it up so that this was just level. It wasn't producing any of these effects. And then I'd probably either bring in more lamp from this side of the shear and cut it off from this side of the shear. That way you're still producing the same effect, but you're not seeing it in the shot, if you follow what I'm saying. And then I just try and get something, you know, over there. Probably. I mean, it's nice that it's darkness, but I think once you added the floppies and this contrast came down so much, you'd probably need something just to read a little bit easier on that side of his face. The tricky part again would be not hitting the piano with that level of crap. But if you imagine that the background is significantly darker, then you can start to play with the contrast locally. So that's what I would say in this particular shot. We go to this one, and now you're starting to see the benefits of the blocking, right? Because we've got this, we're shooting into the shadow, which is Wandering DP 101, Cinematography 101. This is normal now. This is exactly what I'm not going to tell you what you should be doing, but in my mind, this is what I would be doing. So you've got shadow that you're shooting into. There's not a whole lot of contrast here. You could probably bump that up, but the angle is almost perfect, right? You could almost, if you just reach that over just a little bit more, you've just seen a little bit of it. This is probably too hot for me, right? In terms of exposure, it looks like we're at least a stop overexposed for her face relative to these shots. You know, just sort of, you got me. Ew. I would say just over in this particular shot. And then the contrast. So the problem is, okay, you've got some good things here. You got some good things going for you in terms of talent and location. You've got this wall, which is light, and then you've got this really dark hair. If you were to go moodier, so say you went a whole stop, let's get rid of that. Say you stop down Oh, you can't really get that hair back. Is that a grade thing? Or is that a camera thing? Maybe you overexposed so much. Did you blow something out? Let's see. Okay, say you go with something like that, right? This ratio would be closer together, right? It's too extreme in the brightness levels, and I can't fix it with the grade. But if you brought the highlights on her face down, and you then darken this side, what I'd be looking for, really, easiest thing would be, let's take this out. Over here, what am I drawing on? Over here, we go either floppy or use the curtains to make this whole back area darker, right? Make this whole back area darker. If you make the whole back area darker, you have normal exposure on this side of her face. Then I'd probably do the same thing over here. I'd floppy over here. But then you're saying, Patrick, you got this black hair. It's going to look like shit, right? There's going to be absolutely no detail in it. Yeah, you get around that by having some sort of lamp here, some sort of lamp or level or bounce activated so that you just get a little, you don't even want like, you don't want your classic backlight. You want like just a little bit of sheen, just a little bit of, there'll just be a little touch of something in her hair. And you have to play with the angle, right? It's not like you set it up and point the thing at her hair and you're like, that's it, we got it. No, you have to get the camera, set it up, get that person whose actual hair it is, whose color hair it is, and you set it up and you angle the thing, because if you're, 1 degree off to the left or to the right, or if you're too high or too low, that's going to make the biggest difference. So really, this situation would probably be like if we had a full truck and we call for any lamp, and I said to the gaffer, okay, we need to let's bring in a little something for this edge here. And, you heard the little walkie-talkie talk. So let's fly in a dado light. I'd be like, what? What are you bringing in? I said, no, let's do like, I think maybe just a bigger source, something easier, that's easier to control, maybe like LED, sort of like a light mat that's color tunable, something in that department. So that's what I would say. Over here, like a light mat, and then just get that little edge, and that should do it. Okay. Quick break for the questions. What do we got here? We got Neil. Would it help to add flag? Yes, we talked about that. We got Vision and Heart. Try to drag down the top right handle. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's sort of, I think it's in there. I began bothering directors with let's shoot in the shadows thing. It's amazing how people aim for the high key look all the time. Yeah. Yeah, depending on, that should give you an idea of who you're working for. You may want to branch out. Okay. Julian, these stills are way brighter than my grade. Just FYI. Yeah, I think that's a result of, well, it's probably what you're grading in, right? If I'm looking here on my Flanders monitor, where the gamma is slightly different, it looks darker. I guess it's the contrast, really, but I understand exactly what you're saying. It's just a product of, unfortunately, how we have to do these things, because I can't do it in Resolve. That just takes up too much. Okay, let's get into this one. Again, we've got the blocking down now. We're shooting on the shadow side. These things are all good. Now, these skin tones are looking good. This level is looking good. You're getting side light here. This is interesting. You're trying to, you're keeping it off the back wall with those curtains that you've got over there and the angle of the light that's coming in. I like the angle of the actual shot. And then you've got just that little bit of probably natural bounce, I would imagine, if you're a one-man band that's coming back in there. You may have like a little flag over here or something that's cutting off too much level, but it's still leaking through a little bit, which is giving you that edge, right? That probably could be from a few things. It could be from the light hitting back on this wall over here and then bouncing back in and leaking through the flag, or it could be, bouncing from some other source. But good with the relationship between these two, and good with the light and the level, and it all matches nicely. So I would say easy job done. This one, again, this is where you sort of get hosed by the space that you're in, right? White is hard. Caucasian skin and moody environments and white is not easy to do. So I would say, to make things more interesting, when you're in a one-man band situation, is hard. To make things more interesting if you have a big crew is a lot easier, because what you can say is, this woman is dancing around in the ad and she's having a good time, or whatever this is. If you were looking to spice it up and make it a little bit thicker, so make it just that little bit, I guess the word that people use would be cinematic, but it feels more polished and less flat. would be to get that idea of alternating between dark and like proper dark and light. So I would say adding some interest here. So you sort of got it here. You got light, dark, dark. You've sort of got it there, and the mirror is good because it adds depth where there is none. So that's good. But I would say, try and create some more contrast on this side. Try and suck up some of that light. Try and etch it out from the background. Try and add, some points of interest back here that don't take away from what's happening in the foreground, but just make it feel a little bit denser. It feels, but again, with a one-man band, obviously the wider you go, the harder these shots are. And that's pretty much across the board for cinematography, no matter what budget you're on. As it gets wider, it gets harder and harder to do. And that's where you can sort of see the skill coming through, right? If you see an incredible wide shot, it really takes an understanding of light as opposed to manipulating things in a very localized area, which are significantly easier. This one, same idea, same shot, same example of setting up a blocking, setting up a lighting angle, that one source, like when we had Nicholas Johansson on the podcast. You set up that one source and pretty much your job is done. You wrap the whole thing in black. This is another example, same thing, same setup, same dance, where, again, production design and contrast could all be slightly different if you had a crew, essentially. This one is good. Again, we're keeping up the same consistency of using this block thing that we were earlier in the piece, introducing a new location, introducing new action, and in it we've got the same consistent theme of shooting through these things. We've got the, yes, thank you. We've got the curtains, right, that you can't see through. This is good. Just that little bit of shear and that light leak. Now we're talking. Now we're talking, Julian. And, this is interesting down here, this little leak. This is good. We're shooting into the shadow. We've got this nice little highlight that's coming along here showing us whatever the fuck that is. I don't even know. We've got something over here that looks lit up. This is all very good. And I like the composition. I like the framing. Very good with no money. This is like one of those no money shots where even if you had a bucket load of cash, this is what you'd be going for, right? And if you're just starting out and you're trying to get a reel together to show people that you can do things and to show people like, this is, see, this is, I don't just work on shitty stuff with no budget. Like I have done some big stuff. You would want this shot in your big stuff. So you have to think about, okay, what can I shoot to get a reel together where I can get big looking stuff done with no money? This is an example, right? You got the shears, you got the curtains, you got the setup, you got the two people. That's exactly what you would want. Here, again, you got, it's good. It's good. There's nothing wrong with this. The angle of the light's nice. The fill coming back in here is nice. This is all good. The white walls, again, sort of stitch you, but can't do anything about it. And then last but not least, right, this is, Jesus fucking Christ. This is, sorry, language. Let's just answer this here. Thanks, folks. No more text. Thank you. They come up on screen. Okay. This is one of those moments where you probably think that you can't fake this, and you probably think that people are going to know that there is some fuckery going on. You'd be like, well, we can't really change the lighting because they've seen it in this shot and they've seen it in this shot, so they'll know the angle of where the light's coming from. Yes, you certainly can't change the angle, but you can change the look. You've sort of done it down here. It's like, this is darker, obviously, than her face here, right? You've sort of done that trickery, but then you could sort of do the same thing on him, right? You could sort of shape it up a little bit more on him, where I guess if you had the light coming through the window, which is now behind you, the way that you would do it is you would floppy above the camera and cut off, try and just add some interest instead of having this all the same level. Just try and I'd probably leave this as it is and then just try and feather this level down. Let's see if we can do it with a curve. Go. And then we'll add, let's see if we can't get something to look like this. And this is something that you can do in the grade. The problem with doing that in the grade and the problem to leaving, like if you're working in a commercial environment or a bigger crew, is you could say, oh, we'll just do that in the grade. But then the chances of the director ever doing that in the grade is almost zero. So you leaving it, not good. And then the other problem with doing it in the grade is if he's moving around, the grade isn't going to be able to move with him as easily. Yes, you can put a tracking window on it, but like versus the background, his face to the background, it just isn't going to work. So you might as well do it when you're there. So what I'm talking about is if we go like this, make this bigger, something like this. I'd probably go even darker. Yeah, like something like that. We don't need that either. Get rid of that shit. And then we pull this down. And then we feather. Whoop. And then we take it off a little bit. What happened? Oh, what? There we go. Feather. Oh, we feathered to 1,000, that's why. Take that like that, and then we just back this off. You know, like it's just drawing that interest a little bit to him, right? That's probably a bad job. But that's what you'd be going for, right? Just that little bit of shape. That little bit of shape makes a big difference. So, but overall, fucking hell, for one person and the camera, I mean, this is really, which is why I like it, this is proving the point that you don't, with a few smart choices, you can get something that looks really great, right? Being there at the right time, of course, you need that, and the flexibility of being a one-man band is it makes those things easier. And I guess what you would have to take from this, if you say you got this, say you did this, Julian, and then you got a job, and someone wanted you because they like the look of this, and they wanted you to recreate that. This is when you then have to work backwards and say, okay, if I have a crew of, 3 and 3, and we're moving at a fucking snail's pace because there's so many people involved and there's agency and production, what do I need to get this shot? What do I need? Well, let's do it this way. What do I need to get this shot? I need the light coming through that window. We probably aren't going to be there at the exact right time. So in order to recreate it, how do I work backwards and get this with people when it's not ideal, when we're not moving quickly? What are the steps that I have to take? And then that's how you go about on your first commercials. You just work backwards from what you were doing as a one-man band. You just take those components and you figure out, okay, well, I needed this. That light was coming through here. That's what I did. It's probably going to take a lot longer to set up than what it took me because I was probably just stood up on the bed and took the shot and framed it. But once you can do it by yourself in a natural environment, you just take those components and you break them down, and you can ultimately get there on the commercial, right? It gets a lot harder because of the moving pieces. It's not quite as easy, and you just can't grab stuff that you find. You really have to be planning to get that stuff. So that would be my takeaway from this. Other than that, I think that's going to do it for this episode, right? Should we do questions before we go? If you are in the chat, Julian is in the chat, so I'm sure he can point you to the video. Let's see. Can you post a link in the Patreon comments? Yes, Julian, can you do that? Okay, it won't let you do that. Okay. Well, if there's no more questions, that's going to do it for this week. What do we got next week on a shoot? Probably do the same day next week because this is my only day free. And then there are chances that I'll be in LA for the week after that on a job. And that means we'll probably have to do a video of some sort or just a podcast, a regular question and answer podcast. But next week on the podcast, we're doing one giant question and answer podcast because luckily for the Patreon people, you guys get access to this stuff and you can ask questions. And but for the people that listen to the podcast that don't have access, I get a lot of questions. So I'm going to try, and I won't do it very often. Obviously, I haven't done it in, I've probably done it twice in 112 episodes. But I'm going to knock out one big question and answer one. So if you have questions, I'm trying to get the ones that touch the most common bases between them all, because a lot of people are asking the same questions in various ways. So that'll be on the podcast. And what do we got after that? After that, we're doing breakdown, the next one of some stills. And then maybe in the Patreon, maybe next week we'll do like a little teaser from that bedroom scene that we shot. I don't know. We'll see. Can I tell you any more about the lenses that I'm making? No. No, I can't. Because they're still being developed, and I am a person that doesn't like to share. As you can tell from the podcast and the live stream, that's not true. But no, I can't, because I want to get these things and make sure they work. Because the real fear is that no one has done this before, and I am not that smart. And I am sure people at Arri and at Leica and Cooke and anywhere else that makes lenses, I'm sure I'm not the first person to come up with this idea. So the worst thing would be that I say, hey, this is going to work, and then it shits the bed. I look like an idiot. And which I guess I already am, right? Because if I don't produce these lenses in a reasonable amount of time, I had estimated 6 months, you guys are going to know that it didn't work. And then I basically took this money and flushed it down the toilet. So, no, I can't tell you anything about the lenses. I can tell you that I've never heard of them or seen them, and working with a manufacturer that does quite a bit of this stuff, and they've never heard of them or seen them. But they are going to be fun. So, okay. Neil, what's the best way to submit? The best way to submit I went over earlier in the live stream. You get it in sort of 10 minutes before we start, and then I'll have a look-see. Can you tell us how much you spent on them? On the lenses? How much I spent on the lenses? Well, due is going to be, by the time taxes and imports, what's the US dollar? It's $1.28 to Australian. So you're probably looking at about 70 grand. That's what I would guess. So you would hope with that level of cash that you're going to get that money back. So hopefully I don't shit the bed. Okay. I spent a few weeks calibrating with Lightspace with help from Steve, wondering why it's so bright on your side there. Yeah, not sure. If it looks on Vimeo, if it looks good on your, whatever you're grading on, I would say it's good enough, dude. Okay, Brendan's got a few questions, a few lines up. Here we go. Do you have any preferred methods for distorting the image? Throwing a crystal in front for some cool effects, prisms? Do you ever use any effects filters in front of your lenses? Well, we talked about it last week, how I was doing this ad and it wasn't super exciting. So we were shooting on Master Primes and it was a lot of interior night stuff. We were using haze. So I used an 8th glimmer glass the whole time. Just a little bit of interest. Nobody could really tell what it was. There was some questions as to why it was slightly softer, the image, but just said, well, no, it's not soft. It looks good to me. So that I'd sometimes do that. For throwing stuff in front of the lenses, if you're an early listener to the podcast, I am a huge Bruno Avillon fan, or at least I was. It hasn't really done much in the commercial world that I've noted lately, or in the narrative world, but his photography is amazing. But it was sort of like, what am I doing? Am I doing the Bruno thing? By using these little tricks, and those little tricks with the Bruno Avillon effect. I mean, I'm sure you've seen breakdowns or people talk about it before. A lot of people want to know how to get it. It's not super complicated. You need a very large sensor. You need a very long lens, and then you throw in a piece of glass or something that distorts it. A lot of people use diopters. Bruno himself, if you look at the behind the scenes, in conjunction with his cinematographer, will use a matte box specifically that will hold diopters in certain areas, or they'll use a clamp to put a diopter in front. And diopters are good because, like, if you put a piece of glass or a crystal, it will sort of distort the image, but the streaking comes from diopter. So the streaking in Bruno's work is what I like, and it's like a mist that is on a gradient, and that's sort of the look that I like. So I would say, if anything that I like to use, especially for photos, can be a little bit harder with motion when stuff's moving across, but Bruno does it to good effect. I would say diopters are the easiest, and the stronger the better. Probably like a +2 if you're using 138 millimeter ones. Like a +2, I find, will do the best for you. Okay, that's going to do it. What do we got here? One more. Here we go, Neil. If you could have picked a different location for the shoot you reviewed, what would it look like? Wall color, amount of props. If I was going to pick a place, let's see. There is a video by I think it was Solomon Lighthelm. Basically, you want wallpaper, dark. You want walls, dark-ish. You want to think about what the wardrobe is going to be, and then play off of that. so that they just all match. Like if you're going through a proper production, you want darker things that soak up the light rather than reflect the light is going to be big in situations where you're making it moody. Like if you had dark wallpaper in this scene, if you had, let's go to it. If you had dark wallpaper in this scene, it would be much, much moodier just on its own. Just through the wallpaper sucking up. Like if you had green wallpaper with like some old shitty pattern on it, it would be much more interesting than just white. White is vanilla, white is bland, white is boring. So I would say anything but white, but leaning to, you know, some sort of wallpaper, some sort of thing that didn't have sheen, that didn't pick up and reflect. That's all. And the props, I mean, you sort of fit with the mood and with the brief, but things that are away from the wall, things that are not pressed up straight against the wall. Like what's interesting here is this chair is nice, right? That adds to the composition. This little book thing is nice. This little coffee table. Yeah, exactly. I think that's the one, the imposter one. That's the idea. So anyway, whoops. That's going to do it for this episode, ladies and gents. Thanks for the support. Thanks for checking out the live stream, and we will see you in the next one. Da-da.